At 68, the reality of Alec Baldwin is a claustrophobic, heartbreaking paradox. In the chaotic, artificially lit corridors of a Devonshire house penthouse in the spring of 2026, the man who once projected the absolute, unshakable pinnacle of masculine authority on screen is living inside a high-altitude trench. Heavy black cables from reality television cameras snake across the hardwood floors. Glaring production lights illuminate a hallway choked with stacked plastic storage bins. The air is thick with the manic energy of a crowded bunker. Boys in bunk beds, towering cat trees, transparent dog runs, and toys scattered across the floors like colorful shrapnel. This is not the serene, manicured sanctuary of a Hollywood elder statesman. This is a fortress under siege. For 3.5 years, the former titan of the box office has barely worked. He sits amidst the deafening noise of his young family, looks at the camera, and confesses something that carries a profound, heavy exhaustion of a man who has simply endured too much. "I don't want to leave my house anymore," he admits. He wants to retire. He wants to pull the drawbridge up. The global stage that once worshipped him has transformed into a relentless, unforgiving firing squad, and the 68-year-old patriarch just wants to shrink into the absolute furthest corner of his living room. How does a fiercely proud, undeniably brilliant actor become a prisoner of his own sanctuary? What is the terrifying psychological cost of spending your entire life playing the relentless provider until your body and soul are ground into dust? And what happens when a man who firmly believed he could control any crisis is suddenly deafened by the crack of a whip, a single loud pop, an irreversible tragedy that rewrites his entire existence in a fraction of a second? To understand a man hiding inside the Devonshire penthouse today, we must leave the blinding lights of New York City and travel back over half a century. Because long before the cameras invaded his home, and long before the unimaginable weight of public scandal crushed his shoulders, Alec Baldwin was already learning that peace is not a right. Peace is something you must purchase. There is a deeply comfortable, widely accepted illusion about the architecture of family. We are told that childhood is a sacred, protected space, a walled garden where a boy is allowed to simply exist, shielded from the terrifying mathematics of adult survival. But for certain individuals, that wall collapses incredibly early. It was 1970 in Massapequa, New York. Alec was 12 years old. The sensory reality of his world was built on the distinct, blue-collar rhythms of suburban survival. You could hear the relentless, mechanical drone of lawnmowers vibrating through the humid afternoon air. You could feel the cold, sharp splash of water from a garden hose hitting the hot metal of a dirty car in the driveway. Alec was out there, pushing the mower, scrubbing the cars. He was a boy who looked at the adults around him and realized a terrifying, fundamental truth. The world does not care if you are a child. If you want money, you have to extract it from the earth with your own two hands. But what he did with that money is the exact psychological key that unlocks the tragic trajectory of his entire life. One afternoon, he walked into the modest kitchen of his family home. The air was heavy with a sharp, suffocating domestic panic. His mother was sitting at the kitchen table, quietly, desperately crying. For a 12-year-old boy, the sound of his mother weeping is a physiological earthquake. It destabilizes the entire foundation of reality. The crisis, it turned out, was agonizingly mundane but mathematically devastating. She had dipped into the money his sister had earned from selling Girl Scout cookies to cover household expenses. The deficit was exact. She was short $40 or $50. She was paralyzed by the shame and the terror of the missing funds. Alec stood in the kitchen. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the crumpled cash he had sweated over in the driveways and lawns of Massapequa. He handed it to her. He would later describe the sound of that moment as a simple, swift whoosh. The money hit the table, and instantly, the tears stopped. She was saved. Stop for a moment and consider the sheer, invisible psychological violence of that specific scene. Have you ever experienced a moment in your own childhood where you suddenly realized you had to stop being the kid and step in to save the adults? Drop your story in the comments below. Because in that kitchen, a profound and fatal alchemy took place inside Alec Baldwin's mind. He murdered his own childhood. He traded the carefree innocence of a 12-year-old boy for the heavy, suffocating crown of the provider. He learned, on a deeply subconscious level, that love is transactional. Pain can be fixed if you just work hard enough to pay the bill. If the family is crying, it is your absolute duty to reach into your pocket, exhaust your own resources, and stop the tears. He became the emotional bank vault for everyone around him. But the tragedy of becoming the ultimate provider is that you are never, ever allowed to stop providing. The bill simply gets larger. The crises become more complex. Look at the staggering, heartbreaking mirror of this man's life. The 12-year-old boy handing over $50 in a Massapequa kitchen to stop his mother from crying is the exact same soul as the 68-year-old man, decades later, dragging a shattered, chronically agonizing body back onto a horse in Montana, terrified of being sued into absolute bankruptcy. The boy and the aging patriarch are locked in the exact same cycle. The world demands its payment, and Alec Baldwin must bleed to deliver it. He built an entire empire, a legendary cinematic legacy, on the arrogant, desperate assumption that he controlled the chaos. He believed that if he just worked hard enough, yelled loud enough, and generated enough wealth, he could fix any broken scene. He thought he could outrun the vulnerability of that kitchen table forever. But the universe is a terrifyingly patient debt collector. It watched him build his empire. It watched him navigate the vicious, public ruptures of his personal life, the leaked voicemails, and the physical decay of his own bones. And it waited. It waited for a crisp afternoon in a weathered wooden church in New Mexico, where the illusion of control would be violently, permanently stripped from his hands. He was about to learn that no amount of money, no sheer force of will, and no desperate desire to protect his family could stop the devastating trajectory of a single piece of lead. The man who spent his life paying to stop the tears was about to step into a nightmare where the bleeding could not be bought off. There is a terrifying, almost inevitable consequence to spending your formative years as the emotional and financial shock absorber for everyone around you. When a man is conditioned to believe that he must carry the weight of the world, he eventually seeks out the quickest, most absolute method to temporarily turn the world off. In his youth, as Alec Baldwin's star began its dizzying, blinding ascent into the Hollywood stratosphere, the crushing internal pressure of the provider demanded an escape valve. Fame is not a sanctuary. It is a highly pressurized centrifuge. And when you mix the deep, unresolved anxiety of a boy from Massapequa with the limitless, toxic indulgences of the entertainment industry, you do not get peace. You get a chemical storm. The specific location has faded into the blurred, chaotic memory of his youth, but the physical terror of the moment remains permanently branded into his nervous system. Alec found himself alone in an anonymous hotel room. The air was thick with the sterile, artificial chill of commercial air conditioning and the sharp, acidic scent of chemical excess. He had pushed his biology past the threshold of human tolerance. He was desperately trying to numb the relentless, roaring engine of his own mind. And then, the engine simply broke. "I didn't know what was happening," he would later confess, stripping away the polished veneer of the invincible leading man. In the suffocating silence of that hotel room, he felt a distinct, horrifying sensation inside his own chest. A sharp, audible pop. Then absolute, terrifying nothingness. He blacked out. He had stared directly into the freezing void of his own mortality. He had almost become another tragic, predictable footnote in the long history of Hollywood casualties. But his body, fueled by an incredibly stubborn, almost feral will to survive, pulled him back from the edge. He woke up. He cleaned himself up. He put the armor back on, walked out of that hotel room, and proceeded to conquer the absolute summit of the global box office. He built a towering fortress of wealth, influence, and critical acclaim. He became a fixture of the ultra-exclusive, manicured enclaves of the Hamptons. He believed that he had successfully outrun the darkness. He believed he was finally in control. But the universe does not require a lethal overdose to bring a titan to his knees. Sometimes it uses something microscopic. It was an August evening. Alec was in his 40s, standing on the sprawling, elegant porch of a friend's estate in the Hamptons. The air was not particularly humid. It was just a quiet, ordinary summer night. He was a man at the height of his power, looking out over the manicured lawns of his success. And then, without a single warning, the biological trap snapped shut. He felt a sudden, inexplicable wave of freezing cold. It did not creep up on him. He described it as a heavy, icy blanket being aggressively thrown over his shoulders and back. It was as if someone had simply snapped their fingers and cast a dark, biological hex over his body. The invisible assassin was Lyme disease, delivered by a single, unnoticed tick bite in the tall grass of his sanctuary. For the next 3 days, the invincible leading man was reduced to a shivering, agonizing shell. He lay in bed, soaking through the sheets in a violent, unending fever sweat. He experienced a level of joint pain and bone-deep exhaustion, so absolute that he literally could not stand up. The physical instrument that had earned him millions of dollars, the broad shoulders, the commanding presence, the undeniable vitality, had instantly become a prison cell. This is the ultimate, humiliating betrayal of aging and illness. You can hire the best lawyers, employ the best publicists, and command the highest salaries in the world, but you cannot negotiate with bacterial infection. You cannot bribe your own immune system. The armor was cracking. The body was failing. And when the physical body of a highly controlled, deeply anxious man begins to break down, the emotional dam is never far behind. By the mid-2000s, Alec Baldwin was a man fighting wars on multiple fronts. His body was betraying him with chronic, lingering pain. His public divorce had devolved into a vicious, highly publicized blood sport. The boy who had once handed over his lawn-mowing money to buy peace was now a middle-aged man bleeding millions of dollars in legal fees, utterly incapable of buying a single moment of silence. The pressure cooker was screaming, and on April 20th, 2007, it violently, catastrophically exploded. Driven to the absolute edge of his emotional endurance by a bitter custody dispute, Alec picked up the phone and left a voicemail for his 11-year-old daughter, Ireland. When a human being is pushed into the corner of their own psychological limits, they do not speak with reason. They strike blindly, using the most venomous, destructive weapons they possess. The man who had spent his entire life trying to be the ultimate provider, the protector, completely lost his grip on the wheel. He unleashed a torrent of rage into the answering machine. He called his own child a rude, thoughtless little pig. He threatened to fly across the country, simply to punish her. The audio leaked. The entire planet heard it. The global backlash was apocalyptic. Overnight, the sophisticated, charming cinematic icon was completely incinerated in the court of public opinion, replaced by the terrifying audio of a father verbally destroying his little girl. Listen to the tragedy of this specific consequence. Decades later, Alec would sit in a quiet interview chair and admit the agonizing truth about that 2-minute recording. He called it a wound that refuses to heal. There's a scab that forms, he confessed, his voice heavy with the irreversible gravity of his own mistake. And every single day, someone rips the scab off. Every single day. Stop and let that terrifying reality sink into your bones. Have you ever said something in a moment of sheer, blinding exhaustion and anger? Words that left your mouth and instantly shattered someone you loved? Words you would trade your entire life savings to take back? Share your experience in the comments, because there is no human being on earth who has not tasted the bitter, acidic ash of irreversible regret. Alec Baldwin survived the public execution of that voicemail. He survived the chemical storm in the hotel room. He survived the icy blanket of Lyme disease. He stubbornly, relentlessly rebuilt his career, married again, and filled his massive Devonshire penthouse with the chaotic, deafening noise of a new generation of children. He thought the worst of the storms were finally behind him. He thought his only remaining battle was the slow, agonizing decay of his physical joints, the chronic, grinding hip pain that he secretly prayed a surgeon's knife could eventually fix. But as he packed his bags in the autumn of 2021, preparing to fly to a dusty, wind-swept movie ranch in New Mexico to film a low-budget Western, he was walking completely blind into the ultimate, defining nightmare of his existence. He was going to a place called Bonanza Creek. He was going to put on a costume. He was going to hold a piece of cold metal in his hands. And the universe, holding the final, devastating invoice of his entire life, was quietly waiting for him to pull the hammer back. There's a cruel, unspoken biological mathematics to the third act of a man's life. Society tells us that by the time a man crosses the threshold of his 60s, he has earned the right to exhale. The heavy lifting is supposed to be finished. The financial fortress should be secured, and the aging patriarch is expected to peacefully retreat into the quiet, comfortable shade of his achievements. But for Alec Baldwin, the universe had authored an entirely different, incredibly exhausting script. As he moved through his late 50s and into his 60s, his life did not contract into a quiet retirement. It exploded into a massive, chaotic second act. He married Ilaria, a woman 26 years his junior. And almost immediately, the Devonshire penthouse in New York began to rapidly, relentlessly fill with a new generation of children. One baby, then two, then four, then six. To the cameras on the red carpet, it was a beautiful, vibrant story of a Hollywood legend finding absolute renewal. He was the ultimate family man, surrounded by toddlers, strollers, and the undeniable warmth of a bursting household. But behind the manicured Instagram posts and the charming talk show anecdotes, a terrifying, silent pressure was slowly crushing the air out of his lungs. Remember the 12-year-old boy in Massapequa? The boy who handed over his crumpled lawn-mowing money to stop his mother from crying? That exact same psychological conditioning was now operating on an astronomical, multi-million-dollar scale. Alec was in his 60s, staring down the barrel of raising a massive brood of young children who would require private schools, sprawling apartments, nannies, and immense financial security well into his 80s. The provider complex had returned with a vengeance, and it was demanding a terrifying ransom. He could not stop working. He could not retire. But the cinematic landscape of the 2020s was no longer the golden era of his youth. The massive $20 million paychecks for comfortable studio blockbusters were largely gone, replaced by streaming algorithms and tight-fisted corporate accounting. To keep the massive engine of his Devonshire household running, the aging actor was forced to continually step back into the trenches. He took on independent films. He became a producer to secure back-end points. He placed the entire, crushing weight of the financial architecture squarely on his own shoulders. And his body was screaming at him to stop. When you are 25, you can power through a grueling, 14-hour filming day on adrenaline and black coffee. When you are in your 60s, every single hour on a film set is a negotiation with your own decaying biology. Long before he would eventually surrender to the surgeon's knife in 2023, Alec was dragging around a right hip that was quietly, agonizingly disintegrating. The cartilage had worn away. It was bone grinding directly against bone. Every time he stood up from a chair in his penthouse, every time he bent down to pick up a plastic toy from the cluttered hallway, a sharp, electric spike of chronic pain shot straight up his spine. He was self-medicating with sheer, stubborn endurance. Stop for a moment and consider profound, quiet terror of this specific reality. Have you ever felt the agonizing realization that you simply cannot afford to stop moving, even when your physical body is begging you for rest? Have you ever had to smile and go to work while carrying a chronic, invisible pain, simply because people were depending on your paycheck? Drop your story in the comments, because that is the exact, suffocating reality Alec Baldwin woke up to every single morning. He was a legendary actor trapped in a failing body, running on a treadmill that he could not afford to turn off. And it was precisely this toxic, exhausting combination of physical agony and immense financial pressure that drove him, in the autumn of 2021, to sign on as both the lead actor and producer of a low-budget, independent Western called Rust. The production was not a glamorous Hollywood endeavor. It was a gritty, fast-paced shootout in the high desert of New Mexico. The budget was tight. The schedule was unforgiving. The atmosphere was incredibly tense. When Alec arrived at the Bonanza Creek Ranch, he was not just an actor reading lines. He was a producer bearing the burden of the film's success. He was tired. His hip was throbbing with a dull, relentless ache. The dry, dusty wind of the desert whipped against the trailers, heightening the pervasive sense of exhaustion that hung over the entire crew. They were rushing against the clock. Money was burning with every passing hour. It was October 21st, 2021. Alec walked out of the glaring desert sun and stepped into the cool, shadowed interior of a weathered wooden church set. The afternoon light sliced diagonally through the high windows, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air, casting long, dramatic shadows across the wooden floorboards and the painted glass. It was a quiet, intimate rehearsal. The cameras weren't even rolling. He sat down on the wooden pew, wearing the heavy, restrictive costume of an 1880s outlaw. His body ached. He was surrounded by the director, Joel Souza, and the brilliant, deeply respected cinematographer, Helena Hutchins. They were trying to figure out the exact camera angle for a scene where Alec's character draws his revolver, pointing it directly toward the lens. In the chaotic, fast-paced machinery of independent filmmaking, safety protocols are a sacred trust. When an actor is handed a prop weapon, they rely entirely on the invisible chain of command: the armorer, the assistant director, the property master. Someone handed Alec the heavy, vintage-style revolver. A voice echoed through the wooden walls of the church, cutting through the tired silence. Cold gun. Two words. Two words that signify absolute safety. Two words that mean the weapon contains no live ammunition. Two words that legally, professionally, and psychologically permitted the aging actor to raise the heavy iron barrel. He sat on the pew. He listened to Helena Hutchins guiding his movements. He practiced the cross draw, pulling the weapon across his body. He was a 63-year-old man, a father of a massive family, a man who had spent his entire life trying to perfectly control every single variable in his universe, just trying to get the shot right so he could finally go home. His thumb pulled the heavy metal hammer back. And in the very next microsecond, the illusion of control that he had spent 50 years building was completely, permanently, and violently blown to pieces. There is a microsecond between the pulling of a trigger and the ignition of the powder. In the movies, it is a moment of pure, choreographed magic. The hero fires, the blanks flash brightly for the camera, and when the director yells cut, everyone goes home to their families. Alec Baldwin had lived inside that safe, choreographed magic for over 40 years. He trusted the machinery of the illusion. But on the afternoon of October 21st, 2021, the illusion violently shattered. When the hammer struck, there was no cinematic flash. There was a sound that witnesses would later describe with chilling, visceral precision. It sounded like a whip cracking violently against the air, immediately followed by a deafening, unnatural pop. It was not the hollow echo of a blank. It was a heavy, catastrophic, concussive force of life led tearing through the quiet space of the wooden church. The force of the impact was absolute. Helena Hutchins, the brilliant, deeply beloved cinematographer who had been looking directly through the lens to frame the shot, suddenly clutched her abdomen. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the stained glass illuminated a scene that the human brain simply could not process. She stumbled backward, her breath stolen from her lungs, collapsing onto the dusty floorboards. "I can't feel my legs," she gasped. "I can't feel my legs." Listen to the sheer, unadulterated terror of those words. In a fraction of a second, the meticulously controlled set descended into absolute, Screaming chaos. Voices screamed for medics. Crew members frantically dialed 911. Hands pressed desperately against the wound, fighting a losing battle against the terrifying frailty of a human body. Alec Baldwin stood frozen in the center of the church. The heavy iron revolver was still in his hand. The sharp, acrid smell of burning sulfur and gunpowder filled his nostrils. He was trapped in a living nightmare. He was waiting for someone to yell cut. He was waiting to wake up. But nobody yelled cut. Helena Hutchins was rushed to the hospital, where she tragically passed the ultimate threshold, leaving behind a shattered family, a grieving husband, and a young son. A brilliant light was permanently extinguished. And Alec Baldwin, the man who had spent his entire existence desperately trying to be the ultimate protector, the man who handed over his pocket money at 12 years old to fix his family's pain, was now holding a weapon that had caused an irreversible, infinite tragedy. He had not loaded the gun. He had been told it was cold. But the physics of the tragedy did not care about intent. He was holding the iron. The psychological devastation of that reality is something that no human mind is designed to carry. The global media descended like wolves. The criminal investigations began. The civil lawsuits piled up, threatening to completely annihilate the massive financial empire he had spent half a century building. The world painted him as a monster, an arrogant star whose negligence had cost a mother her life. He retreated to his Devonshire penthouse. He surrounded himself with the chaotic noise of his young children. But in the quiet hours of the night, when the penthouse finally fell silent, the ghost of that wooden church followed him into the dark. When the mind is pushed past the absolute limit of psychological endurance, it eventually offloads the trauma onto the physical body. The body becomes the final battleground. Years passed. The legal battles drained his resources with terrifying velocity. To avoid being sued into absolute, catastrophic bankruptcy by the multiple parties involved in the tragedy, a deeply agonizing and surreal legal settlement was reached. Alec Baldwin had to finish the movie. He had to go back. In the spring, the production of Russ relocated to the high, unforgiving elevations of Montana to shoot the remaining scenes. Alec was now in his mid-60s. He was carrying the unbearable, suffocating weight of grief, public vilification, the grinding pain of a deteriorating hip, and the sheer terror of financial ruin. He arrived in Montana as a broken man, and his biology finally waved the white flag. The medical term is orthostatic hypotension. It is a condition where the blood pressure suddenly, violently drops when a person stands up, depriving the brain of oxygen. But in the context of Alec Baldwin's life, it was not just a medical condition. It was his body physically refusing to carry the burden any longer. It was his nervous system simply pulling the plug. It happened during a ST, Patrick's Day weekend. The pressure of the looming production, the altitude, and the sheer, toxic stress in his bloodstream reached a boiling point. Alec stood up. The room instantly dissolved into a dizzying, terrifying black tunnel. Gravity seized him. The 60-something-year-old patriarch collapsed. He didn't just stumble. He blacked out entirely, his heavy, aging frame crashing violently toward the floor, falling directly onto his wife, Ilaria. He regained consciousness, bewildered and terrified. He tried to stand again. Blackout. He fell a second time. And then a third. 3 consecutive violent blackouts. His body was screaming, begging for the heavy, crushing machinery of his life to finally stop. Stop for a moment and consider the profound vulnerability of this scene. Have you ever experienced a stress so absolute, a grief so heavy, that your physical body simply short-circuited and forced you to the floor? Have you ever had your body betray you exactly when you needed it to be strong? Tell us in the comments. Because that sudden, terrifying loss of physical autonomy is a humiliating reminder that we are all ultimately fragile biological machines. Following the collapses, The invincible cinematic titan was completely bedridden for 8 straight days. He could not stand. He could not walk. For 2 agonizing weeks, he required intense physical therapy just to regain the basic grammar of human movement. Any ordinary man would have called it a day. Any ordinary man would have told the lawyers, the producers, and the universe itself to back off. He would have checked into a hospital and surrendered. But Alec Baldwin is not an ordinary man. He is trapped in the terrifying, inescapable psychology of the 12-year-old provider. If he didn't finish the film, the lawsuits would destroy his family's future. The Devonshire penthouse, the private schools for his 6 young children, the entire fortress he had built to protect them would crumble into dust. So, what did the 60-something-year-old man do? He underwent his physical therapy. He dragged his exhausted, traumatized, and blood pressure-starved body out of that bed. He walked out into the freezing Montana air. And he literally climbed back onto the horse. Look at the staggering Greek tragedy level of cruelty in that single image. A gray-haired man, haunted by the ghost of a fatal accident, recovering from 3 violent blackouts, hauling a bone-grinding, decayed hip into a leather saddle to finish a cowboy movie he now despised, simply to pay the blood money required to keep his family safe. He was riding through his own personal hell. He finished the movie. He returned to New York. In May of 2023, he finally surrendered to the inevitable and allowed surgeons to cut open his leg and replace his shattered hip with a piece of synthetic titanium. The hospital photo his wife posted showed him smiling through the exhaustion, hoping to finally turn the page on a chapter of very intense chronic pain. He had survived the desert. He had survived the collapse in Montana. He had survived the surgeon's knife. But as the calendar turned toward the spring of 2026, Alec Baldwin was about to discover the final, ultimate irony of his lifelong struggle. He had successfully built the fortress. He had paid the ransom. He had protected his family. But he had accidentally locked himself inside. There's a profound, almost invisible tragic irony that awaits men who spend their entire lives building a fortress to protect themselves from the world. If you build the walls high enough, thick enough, and heavy enough to keep all your enemies out, you eventually wake up to a terrifying realization. You have successfully built a prison, and you are locked inside. By the spring of 2026, Alec Baldwin had survived the unthinkable. He had navigated the blistering, apocalyptic firestorm of the Bonanza Creek tragedy. He had dragged his broken, blood pressure-starved body through the freezing winds of Montana to finish a movie he was bound by blood and legal necessity. He had surrendered to the surgeon's knife, trading his disintegrating hip for synthetic titanium. He had paid the universe its terrible ransom. He had kept his family safe from the financial abyss. He retreated to his Devonshire House penthouse in New York City. The massive, sprawling luxury apartment was supposed to be the ultimate sanctuary. It was supposed to be the place where the 68-year-old cinematic titan could finally sit in a leather chair, exhale, and enjoy the quiet twilight of his incredibly turbulent life. But there is no quiet twilight for the boy from Massapequa. In March of 2025, a camera crew was granted access to the Devonshire penthouse to film a reality television series. What the lenses captured was not the manicured, serene elegance of Hollywood royalty. It was something that resembled a chaotic, high-altitude military bunker. The physical reality of Alec Baldwin's final sanctuary is breathtakingly claustrophobic. Imagine walking through the corridors of what should be a pristine, multi-million-dollar Manhattan estate. Instead of priceless art and silence, you are stepping over heavy black production cables snaking across the hardwood floors. The hallways are choked, narrowed to mere pathways by towering, stacked plastic storage bins. The air vibrates with the relentless, ungovernable kinetic energy of 7 young children. You look into bedrooms and see boys crammed into bunk beds, sharing tight spaces in a penthouse that suddenly feels agonizingly small. The dining area has been overtaken by massive, sprawling cat trees. There is even a transparent, plastic dog run constructed right in the middle of the living space. Toys, brightly colored, sharp plastic fragments of childhood, are scattered across every visible square inch of the floor behind the camera operators. It does not look like a home. It looks like a trench. It is a domestic war zone, filled with the deafening screams of toddlers, the barking of animals, and the blinding glare of reality TV production lights. And sitting right in the middle of this suffocating, inescapable chaos is a 68-year-old man with a titanium hip and a ghost behind his eyes. Look closely at the psychology of what is actually happening here. Alec Baldwin, the man who was hunted by the paparazzi, the man who despised the vicious intrusion of the media into his private tragedy, willingly opened his front door and invited reality television cameras directly into his living room. Why? Why would a man who desperately wants peace allow producers to drag lighting rigs past his children's bunk beds? Because the provider never gets to stop providing. The army of children, the massive New York real estate, the legal bills, the machine demands fuel. If the prestige movie roles vanish, if the mainstream studios hesitate to cast him, the provider will simply find another way to mine the earth, even if it means turning his own claustrophobic sanctuary into a broadcasted spectacle. He is feeding his family with the very privacy he spent decades fighting to protect. But the psychological toll of living inside this televised bunker has fundamentally altered the chemistry of his soul. On April 13th, 2026, during an incredibly revealing interview, the 68-year-old actor sat down and delivered a sentence that strips away every remaining illusion of Hollywood glamour. He was describing his life over the past 3.5 years, a period where he barely worked, where he remained sequestered inside the Devonshire penthouse, adjusting to the endless, grinding, day-by-day rhythm of domestic survival. His voice was not the booming, commanding baritone that once dominated the silver screen. It was quiet. It was surrendered. "I don't want to leave my house anymore," he confessed. "I don't want to leave my house anymore." He said he wants to retire. He wants to stay home with his kids. On the surface, it sounds like the sweet, sentimental desire of a devoted father. But listen to the absolute, crushing fatigue underneath those words. Listen to the agoraphobia of a man who has been bruised, battered, and publicly crucified so many times that the world outside his front door simply looks like an executioner's block. The bright lights of Vanity Fair, the Oscars, the exclusive Hamptons parties, the entire glittering empire that he spent half a century conquering has completely lost its glow. The world outside is where you get sued. The world outside is where the paparazzi hurl questions about dead cinematographers. The world outside is where your blood pressure drops and you collapse on the floor. So, he pulls the drawbridge up. He locks the door. He prefers the plastic storage bins. He prefers the cat trees and the bunk beds and the deafening noise of the toddlers, because inside this specific chaos, he is safe. Inside this trench, nobody is handing him a cold gun. Stop for a moment and look at your own life. Have you ever gone through a season of such profound, relentless trauma or exhaustion that you just wanted to lock your front door, draw the curtains, and completely disconnect from the outside world? Have you ever felt that the only way to survive was to make your universe as small as a single room? Let me know in the comments below, because that desperate urge to hide is not a celebrity phenomenon. It is a profoundly, universally human defense mechanism. Alec Baldwin has made his universe incredibly small. But as he sits in the Devonshire penthouse in the spring of 2026, surrounded by the chaotic, beautiful, exhausting evidence of his own fertility, a final, unanswerable question begins to echo in the narrow hallways. He has spent 56 years, from the kitchen in Massapequa to the penthouse in Manhattan, trying to buy peace. He has sacrificed his youth, his peace of mind, and his physical body to be the savior of everyone around him. He survived the journey. But what is left of the man underneath the armor? When the reality TV cameras finally pack up their cables, when the toddlers finally fall asleep in their bunk beds and the massive New York apartment finally goes pitch black. What does the 68-year-old provider see when he closes his eyes in the dark? When the absolute darkness finally settles over the Devonshire penthouse and the reality television cameras are powered down and locked away in their heavy plastic cases, Alec Baldwin is left with the one thing he has spent his entire life running from: the silence. What does a 68-year-old man carrying the ghost of a tragic accident, a titanium hip, and the heavy, unshakable crown of the provider see when he closes his eyes in the dark? He does not see the glamorous, flashing bulbs of the Academy Awards. He does not see the millions of dollars in box office receipts. He does not see the magazine covers or the Hollywood royalty he once stood shoulder to shoulder with. He sees a kitchen table in Massapequa. He sees his mother crying over a missing $50. When we look at the absolute totality of Alec Baldwin's 68 years on Earth, the tragic, breathtaking poetry of his existence comes into perfect, undeniable focus. His life was never truly about acting. The blockbuster movies, the Emmys, the brilliant comedic timing, all of it was merely the spectacular, high-stakes machinery he used to perform the one job he learned at 12 years old. He was just a boy trying to pay the bill so the people he loved would stop crying. He paid it in the 1980s with his youth. He paid it in the 2000s with his mental health and his reputation. He paid it in the deserts of New Mexico and the freezing winds of Montana with his own biological deterioration. Every time the universe handed him an invoice, whether it was a legal settlement, a medical crisis, or the immense cost of raising a massive new generation of children, he reached into his pocket and handed over pieces of his own soul. He survived the chemical storm in the anonymous hotel room. He survived the icy, paralyzing grip of Lyme disease. He survived the absolute, crushing public humiliation of a leaked voicemail. And he survived the devastating, permanent trauma of a single, deafening pop inside a wooden church. The armor is heavily dented. The nervous system is severely scarred. The physical joints have been replaced with cold metal. But he is still standing. The man who once conquered the world has finally realized that the world cannot be conquered. It can only be endured. And so, he has made his peace with the trench. He has decided that the chaotic, noisy, toileter hallways of his Devonshire penthouse are infinitely safer than the vicious, unforgiving glare of the public square. I don't want to leave my house anymore. It is not a surrender to defeat. It is a surrender to reality. For 56 years, the engine of his anxiety has been running at maximum capacity. But sitting there in the quiet dark of 2026, listening to the soft, rhythmic breathing of his children sleeping in their bunk beds, perhaps the aging patriarch can finally hear something else. Perhaps beneath the noise of the New York City traffic outside his window, he can finally hear the old, rattling motor of that 1970s lawnmower slowly sputtering out. The driveway is clean. The water hose is turned off. The $50 are on the table. The bill is finally paid. The boy from Massapequa can go inside now. He can rest. We spend our entire lives carrying the heavy, invisible buckets of water for the people we love, often forgetting that our own shoulders are slowly breaking under the weight. What about you? As you look back on the long road of your own life, what heavy burden did you take on as a child that you are still carrying today? What is the one thing you are finally ready to put down so you can rest in your own house? Please share your hard-earned wisdom in the comments below. Your story might be the exact permission someone else needs to finally exhale. If this journey through the chaotic, tragic, and deeply human life of Alec Baldwin moved you, please leave a like, share this video with someone who carries too much, and subscribe to our channel for more untold stories behind the legends. Thank you for your time. And until next time, remember that you do not have to pay for your own peace.